Welcome back to Visions Beyond. I'm so glad you could join us.
It's great to be here.
Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating and maybe a little surprising for some of you. The link between diabetes and gastroparesis.
Yeah,
But first, don't forget to hit that like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe to Visions Beyond so you don't miss any of our deep dives.
definitely.
Okay, so gastroparesis, I think a lot of people may not be familiar with that term. Can you give us a quick rundown on what it is?
Sure. Basically, it's a condition where your stomach doesn't empty properly. It's like imagine your stomach, it's supposed to be this churning machine, breaking down food. But with gastroparesis, it's like someone hit the pause button, things just slow down, food kind of hangs out in there longer than it should,
Yeah.
and it can cause a whole bunch of uncomfortable symptoms.
It sounds unpleasant. And the surprising thing is diabetes is actually a leading cause of this.
It is.
So how common an issue is this, especially for people who have diabetes?
Well, it's more common than you might think. A lot of people associate gastroparesis with other conditions, but delayed gastric emptying, which is kind of the hallmark of gastroparesis, that can affect up to 50% of people with diabetes.
Wow, that's a significant number.
Yeah, it is. But it's important to remember, not everyone with delayed emptying actually has gastroparesis. To get that diagnosis, you need both the delay and you got to have some moderate to severe symptoms along with it.
Right, so it's not just, a little bit of discomfort. It's something that can really impact your life.
Mhm.
What are some of the symptoms that people might experience that could be red flags for gastroparesis,
Well, you might feel full very quickly after you eat.
even if you haven't eaten a lot?
Yeah, even just a small amount. Nausea and vomiting are pretty common too, unfortunately. And then you've got bloating, abdominal pain, things like that.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It can be. And then because of the way food is being processed, or not processed, I should say, it can lead to fluctuations in your blood sugar levels, which is especially problematic if you're already managing diabetes.
Makes sense.
And some people even experience unintended weight loss or weight gain because of it.
Wow, that's a lot to deal with. So let's break it down a little bit. How does diabetes, specifically high blood sugar over time, actually lead to these problems in the stomach? What's the connection there?
Well, you see, your stomach muscles, they need signals from a nerve called the vagus nerve to work right. But when blood sugar levels are high for a long time, it can damage that nerve, kind of like fraying a cable.
Oh, I see.
So the stomach muscles don't get the messages they need. And that leads to slower emptying and all those uncomfortable gastroparesis symptoms.
It's fascinating how everything's connected. So high blood sugar messes up the communication system, and then the stomach can't keep up. But then you mentioned earlier that it can actually make diabetes harder to manage too, right? It's not a one-way street.
Yeah, unfortunately, it creates this kind of vicious cycle. You see, when food hangs out in the stomach for too long with gastroparesis, it's not being absorbed into the bloodstream like it normally would. So it makes it really hard to know how much insulin you need and when to take it. You get these blood sugar fluctuations that are difficult to predict.
It's like trying to hit a moving target then.
Exactly. And that just makes diabetes management even tougher.
So we know that people with diabetes are at a higher risk for gastroparesis. But can you give us an idea of just how much more common it is compared to people without diabetes?
Sure. Studies have shown that over a 10-year period, about 5% of people with type 1 diabetes and about 1% with type 2 diabetes developed gastroparesis. That's quite a bit higher than folks without diabetes, where it's less than 1%.
Those are some pretty startling numbers.
Yeah.
So what's actually happening on a cellular level that makes high blood sugar so detrimental to the way our stomach functions?
Well, we're still learning a lot about the exact mechanisms, but there are a few key theories. One idea is that high blood glucose levels trigger inflammation and oxidative stress. And those can damage nerves and muscles, including those in the stomach. It's kind of like a constant attack on those delicate tissues.
Inflammation, it seems to be at the root of so many health problems.
Right. It's involved in a lot. And researchers are also looking into the role of immune cells called macrophages.
Macrophages.
Yeah, they seem to be involved in potentially injuring stomach muscles in people with diabetes. But this is still a fairly new area of research. We've got a lot more to uncover.
Always more to learn. It's incredible how complex our bodies are. What other areas of research are scientists excited about when it comes to this connection?
One area that's getting a lot of attention is the role of epigenetic changes.
What are those?
Well, these are modifications that affect how our genes are expressed, not the genes themselves. Think of it like having the same blueprint, but the way it's interpreted can change.
Interesting.
And scientists are looking into whether these changes could be playing a role in how well the stomach empties in people with diabetes.
So diabetes might actually be influencing how our genes control our stomach muscles.
It's a possibility. It adds another layer of complexity to this whole connection.
It really does. Now, let's say someone's listening to this and they're thinking, hey, some of these symptoms sound familiar. I've been feeling really full after meals or I've been experiencing nausea. How would they know if it's actually gastroparesis and not just, a stomach bug or something else going on?
That's a really important question. Unfortunately, you can't diagnose gastroparesis just based on symptoms alone. There are lots of things that can cause similar digestive issues. So you really need to see a doctor, and they'll have to run some specific tests to confirm the diagnosis.
So no self-diagnosing. Dr. Google is not going to cut it here.
Right. It's best to get checked out.
So what kind of tests are used to actually pinpoint gastroparesis? Are there specific tests for that?
Oh, yeah, there are a few different tools in the diagnostic toolbox.
Okay, tell us about them.
One of the most common is a gastric emptying study. This basically measures how quickly food is emptying from your stomach.
Makes sense. How do they do that?
Well, there are a few ways to do it. They might use a special scan called scintigraphy. It tracks a radioactive tracer as it moves through your digestive system.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They can also use a breath test that measures gases produced as food's digested. And there's even this wireless motility capsule that you swallow.
Oh, the capsule.
Yeah, it transmits information about muscle activity and pressure as it travels through your digestive tract.
That's amazing. Technology is so cool.
I know, right?
So are there any other tests that they use to diagnose this?
Sometimes they'll use an upper GI endoscopy. Basically, they insert this thin tube with a camera into your esophagus, stomach, and duodenum.
Oh, so they can actually see what's going on in there.
Yep. Allows them to examine the lining of those organs, look for any abnormalities.
Wow, that's pretty high tech.
It is. And there's also a test called antral manometry. It measures pressure and muscle activity in the lower part of the stomach, the part that helps push food into the small intestine.
Okay, so they're really looking at how well those muscles are working.
Exactly. And then sometimes they might use imaging techniques like a barium X-ray or an ultrasound.
Right, more general imaging.
Yeah, just to rule out any other potential problems. And in some cases, they might even take biopsies. Those are small tissue samples.
To examine under a microscope.
You got it. They're just trying to get as much information as possible to figure out what's going on.
It's great that there are so many ways to get an accurate diagnosis.
Right.
So once gastroparesis is confirmed, what are the treatment options? Is it curable?
Well, unfortunately, there's no cure for gastroparesis just yet.
Oh, that's too bad.
But that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. There are actually a number of ways to manage the condition and improve those pesky symptoms.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
At least there are ways to make it better. So what does that look like? What's the treatment approach for gastroparesis?
Well, it's usually a multi-pronged approach,
Yeah.
tackling the problem from different angles.
I see.
And since we're focusing on the diabetes connection today, I think the first and most important step is blood sugar control.
That makes sense, given what we've been talking about.
Exactly. We want to make sure those blood sugar levels are healthy. Helps minimize further damage to that vagus nerve and potentially slow down the progression of gastroparesis.
So it's all about protecting those communication lines between the brain and the stomach.
You got it.
Now, what about the symptoms themselves? What can people do to find some relief from all that discomfort?
Well, that's where dietary changes come in. They play a really important role.
Like what kind of changes?
Instead of 3 large meals a day, switching to smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day can make a big difference.
So it's about not overloading the stomach.
Right. Give it smaller, more manageable tasks. And we also want to focus on foods that are easy to digest, things that won't sit in the stomach for ages.
So what kind of foods are we talking about here? What should people be reaching for?
Lean protein is a good option. Think chicken or fish. Also, well-cooked vegetables are easier to digest than raw ones. And if you want some fruit, choose varieties without the skin.
Got it. So it's all about making smart choices and really paying attention to how different foods affect you. Are there any foods that people with gastroparesis should avoid altogether?
Yeah, high-fat foods, especially greasy or fried foods, can be a problem. Spicy foods can be triggers for some folks too. And while fiber is generally good for digestion, with gastroparesis, it can actually slow things down. So moderating your fiber intake might be a good idea.
Interesting. So even things that are normally considered healthy might need to be adjusted. It really is about finding what works for you.
Absolutely. It's all about personalization. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to chew your food thoroughly.
Yeah, that seems so basic.
It is, but it makes a huge difference. The more you break down the food in your mouth, the less work your stomach has to do.
You're right. We often just gobble down our food without really thinking about it.
Exactly. It's like we're always multitasking, even when we're eating, but slowing down, savoring each bite, paying attention, it can all really improve digestion and help with those gastroparesis symptoms.
It's a good reminder to be more mindful during meals. What about exercise? Does that play a role in managing gastroparesis?
It sure does.
Really?
Regular physical activity can help stimulate the muscles in your digestive tract, keep things moving, prevents that sluggishness that can contribute to gastroparesis symptoms.
So it's not just about what we eat, but how we move our bodies too.
Absolutely. You don't have to become a marathon runner or anything. Even moderate exercise like brisk walking, swimming, gentle yoga can make a difference.
That's good news for those of us who aren't exactly gym rats.
Right. And activities that engage your core muscles like Pilates or yoga can be particularly helpful.
Because they strengthen the muscles that support digestion.
Exactly. And anything that gets you moving and increases blood flow, like walking or dancing, can help promote healthy digestion too.
So it's really about finding activities you enjoy and can stick with. Now, we've talked about diet and exercise, but what about stress? We know that stress can worsen gastroparesis symptoms. What are some good ways to manage stress?
Well, stress can really mess with our digestive system, so finding healthy coping mechanisms is super important. Mindfulness techniques like meditation or deep breathing exercises, those can be really helpful.
Yeah, I can see how that would be beneficial.
They calm down the nervous system, reduce the impact of stress on the body, including the digestive tract.
Good tips. Any other suggestions?
Spending time in nature has been shown to have great effects on stress levels. Even just a short walk in the park, listening to birdsong, it can help shift your mindset, reduce anxiety.
I love that.
And don't forget about connecting with loved ones, talking to a supportive friend, doing something you enjoy, it can help too.
Absolutely. It's all about finding those things that help you de-stress and recharge. Managing gastroparesis sounds like a pretty complex journey. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed by this diagnosis, especially if they're also dealing with diabetes?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember you're not alone. Gastroparesis is more common than people think, and there are resources out there to help you navigate this. Don't be afraid to reach out to your healthcare team, your doctor, a dietitian, even a therapist.
So it's about building a support system,
Yeah, you've got a whole team of experts to help you through this. And connecting with other people who are living with gastroparesis can be really powerful too.
like support groups.
Exactly. There are online groups, communities where you can share experiences, tips, encouragement. Knowing that other people get what you're going through, that can be really validating.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a reminder that you're not in this alone.
Yeah, it's true. Living with gastroparesis on top of managing diabetes, it can be a real juggling act.
Definitely. We talked a bit about how gastroparesis can make blood sugar control more difficult. Can you go into more detail on why that is? What makes it so tricky for people who are dealing with both conditions?
Sure. So think about it this way. Normally, when you eat, your stomach empties at a pretty predictable rate, right? And your body absorbs the glucose from the food steadily.
Okay.
But with gastroparesis, that whole process gets thrown off. Food kind of hangs out in the stomach longer. And sometimes it empties in these unpredictable bursts.
So the glucose from the food isn't entering the bloodstream at a steady pace.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so difficult to predict how much insulin you need and when to take it. It's like trying to time a train that keeps changing its schedule.
I see.
You might end up with too much insulin if the food's taking a long time to digest. And that can lead to hypoglycemia, low blood sugar.
It sounds like it could be dangerous.
It definitely can be, honestly. Hypoglycemia can cause a lot of problems, feeling shaky, confused.
Yeah.
And in more serious cases, it can even lead to seizures. On the other hand, if a lot of food suddenly empties from the stomach, you might get a rapid spike in blood sugar, hyperglycemia.
So you're constantly trying to avoid both highs and lows.
Exactly. It's a real balancing act. And it's one of the biggest challenges for people managing both conditions. These fluctuations can make it harder to keep A1C levels in a healthy range, and it increases the risk of long-term complications from both diabetes and gastroparesis.
So working closely with your doctor is really crucial in this situation.
Absolutely. Your doctor can help adjust your medication, your insulin doses, and the timing to account for those unpredictable changes. They can also recommend ways to monitor your blood sugar more frequently, so you can stay on top of those fluctuations.
So it takes a lot of communication and teamwork.
It really does. Now let's go back to the vagus nerve for a minute. We know that damage to that nerve is a big factor in gastroparesis related to diabetes. Can you remind us how this nerve works in a healthy digestive system?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, so the vagus nerve, it's like the control center for your digestion. It runs all the way from your brain down to your abdomen, connecting to a lot of your organs along the way, including the stomach.
So it sends messages back and forth between the brain and the digestive system.
Exactly. When it comes to digestion, the vagus nerve controls the muscles that contract to move food through your digestive tract. It's like a wave-like motion called peristalsis.
Right.
And it also regulates the release of stomach acid and enzymes that are needed to break down food.
So when high blood sugar damages the vagus nerve, that whole process gets disrupted.
Yeah, exactly. The signals don't travel as well, the muscles don't contract like they should, and the whole system slows down. That's how you end up with the delayed stomach emptying that's characteristic of gastroparesis.
It really shows you how interconnected everything is in the body. For those who are interested in the science behind it, can you explain what actually happens to the vagus nerve when blood sugar levels are high for a prolonged period?
Okay. So high blood sugar can cause something called glycation. It's where sugar molecules attach to proteins and lipids in the body.
Glycation.
Yeah, it's kind of like caramelizing something. But instead of happening in a pan, it's happening inside your body. And it's not a good thing for those delicate nerve fibers.
So those excess sugar molecules are basically causing damage to the nerve.
Exactly. This glycation can really damage the vagus nerve, making it harder to transmit those signals. And the longer high blood sugar persists, the greater the risk of nerve damage and complications like gastroparesis.
That really emphasizes the importance of managing blood sugar levels. It's not just about numbers on a meter, it's about protecting your nerves and preventing damage in the long run.
I agree. Now, we focused a lot on diabetes, but there are other things that can contribute to gastroparesis as well.
What are some of those other factors?
Well, certain medications can cause it or contribute to it, especially those that slow down gastric emptying. Viral infections can also damage the stomach or nerves. Sometimes surgery involving the stomach or the vagus nerve can play a role.
So it's not always a direct result of diabetes.
Right. There can be multiple factors involved, and sometimes the cause is actually unknown. We call that idiopathic gastroparesis.
So it sounds like a good medical history, and a variety of tests are really important to determine the underlying cause.
Absolutely. It's essential to get the full picture. Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about the physical side of gastroparesis, but I think it's equally important to address the emotional and mental impact this condition can have.
You're right. It's not just about the physical symptoms.
Exactly. Imagine dealing with constant nausea, bloating, unpredictable blood sugar swings, and the anxiety of not knowing when you'll actually be able to digest your next meal. It can be incredibly frustrating and emotionally draining.
That sounds really tough.
It is. And it can make it hard to enjoy simple things, like going out to eat with friends or attending social gatherings where food is involved.
I can see how it could really affect your quality of life.
It definitely can. And it's not uncommon for people with gastroparesis to feel isolated, anxious, or even depressed. The unpredictable nature of the condition can make it hard to plan ahead. You might feel like you've lost control over your own body.
That feeling of uncertainty can be really difficult to deal with.
Hmm.
So what are some things people can do to cope with these emotional challenges?
Well, the first step is to acknowledge and validate those feelings. Don't minimize the emotional impact of this condition.
That's so important.
It is. It's also crucial to seek support, whether it's from loved ones, a therapist, or even a support group specifically for people with gastroparesis.
Connecting with others who understand what you're going through can be so helpful.
It really can. Sharing your experiences, tips, and even just venting your frustrations can create a sense of community and reduce those feelings of isolation. You realize you're not alone in this.
That sense of belonging can make a huge difference. Are there any other coping strategies that you recommend?
Stress management is also key. Stress can make gastroparesis symptoms worse. So finding healthy ways to manage stress is really important. Things like meditation, deep breathing exercises, yoga, or spending time in nature.
Those are great suggestions.
And don't forget about self-care, engaging in activities that you enjoy, whether it's reading, listening to music, or spending time with loved ones. Those things can really lift your spirits and improve your overall well-being.
It's a good reminder that taking care of your mental and emotional health is just as important as managing the physical symptoms. So it sounds like a holistic approach is essential.
Exactly. You're a whole person, not just a collection of symptoms. And remember, you're not defined by your diagnosis. There is hope for a fulfilling life, even with gastroparesis. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some practical steps people can take to regain control and improve their quality of life, even in the face of these challenges.
So it's really about recognizing that you're a whole person, right? Not just a set of symptoms.
Absolutely. And remember, there is hope for a fulfilling life, even with gastroparesis.
There is meat. So let's talk about some practical steps that people can take to improve their quality of life,
Yeah.
even when dealing with the challenges of gastroparesis, especially in the context of diabetes.
Okay, I think empowerment is key. We've talked about the importance of diet, but let's dig into that a little bit deeper. What we eat and how we eat can have a huge impact on how we feel.
Yeah, you're right. We hear about diet all the time, but it's helpful to get some specific advice tailored to gastroparesis.
Yeah.
So what are some key strategies that people can implement? What should they be focusing on?
Well, the main goal is to make the digestive process as easy as possible.
Okay.
So we want to choose foods that are easy to break down
Hmm.
and that won't just sit in the stomach forever, triggering those uncomfortable
It's
symptoms.
about taking the pressure off the
Yeah,
stomach.
give it a break.
What types of foods are we talking about here? What are some good options?
Well, foods that are lower in fat and fiber, they tend to move through the digestive system more efficiently. So lean protein, like chicken or fish, that's a good choice. Well-cooked vegetables are easier to digest than raw ones.
Hmm.
And if you're craving fruit, go for the varieties without the skin.
Got it. So it's about making smart swaps and being aware of how different foods affect you personally.
Hmm.
Are there any specific foods that people with gastroparesis should avoid completely?
Oh yeah, certain foods can be real troublemakers. High-fat foods, greasy or fried foods, those can be problematic.
Okay.
And spicy foods can be a trigger for some people.
Right.
And you know how fiber is generally good for digestion?
Yeah.
Well, in the case of gastroparesis, it can actually slow things down even more. So moderating your fiber intake might be a good idea.
Interesting. So even things that are typically considered healthy might need to be adjusted. It really highlights the importance of personalized advice.
For sure. Now, beyond just what you eat, the way you eat can make a difference too.
How so?
Well, instead of having 3 big meals, try spacing your food intake out over 5 or 6 smaller meals throughout the day.
So it's that grazing approach we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You're giving your stomach smaller portions to work with, and it can make a big difference.
Makes sense. Are there any other helpful tips along those lines?
Oh, definitely. Chewing your food thoroughly. It might seem obvious,
Yeah.
but honestly, it's super important.
I know I'm guilty of scarfing down my food sometimes.
I think we all are. We often rush through meals, not really thinking about how we're eating.
Multitasking even when we're supposed to be enjoying our food.
Right. But if you can slow down, savor each bite, really pay attention, it can really improve your digestion, and it can help manage those gastroparesis symptoms.
I love that. It's a
Yeah.
great reminder to be present during meal times. It's not just fuel. It's an experience. So we've talked about diet and how we eat. What about exercise? Does being physically active play a role in managing gastroparesis?
You bet it does. Regular exercise. It can actually help stimulate those muscles in your digestive tract, keep things moving, prevent that sluggishness that contributes to gastroparesis.
So it's not just what you put in your body, it's also about how you move your body.
Exactly. And you don't have to go crazy. You know, you don't have to become a marathon runner or anything. Even moderate exercise, like brisk walking, swimming, gentle yoga, it can all make a difference.
Good to know.
And, you know, activities that engage your core muscles, like Pilates or yoga,
Yeah.
those can be especially beneficial
Yeah.
because they strengthen the muscles that support your digestion.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I imagine anything that gets you up and moving increases blood flow that can also help.
Oh, definitely. Walking, dancing, anything that you enjoy and can stick with. So we've talked about diet, exercise, but stress management is crucial too. We've said it before. Stress can make gastroparesis symptoms worse.
It can. What are some effective ways to manage stress, especially when it comes to its impact on digestion?
Well, I'm a big fan of mindfulness techniques like meditation or deep breathing exercises.
Yeah, those can be so helpful.
They really calm down your nervous system, reduce that impact of stress on the body, and that includes your digestive system.
Really good strategies. And they're easy to incorporate into a busy day. What else can people try?
Spending time in nature. It sounds simple, but it can make a huge difference.
Oh, I agree.
Even a short walk in the park, listening to the birds, it can shift your mindset and lower your anxiety. And never underestimate the power of connecting with loved ones. Talking to a friend, doing something you enjoy, those things can help buffer the effects of stress too.
It's all about finding those outlets that work for you.
Right.
Those things that help you release tension and just recharge.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Diet, exercise, stress management. It's clear that managing gastroparesis, it's a multifaceted journey. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed by all of this, especially if they're also managing diabetes? It can feel like a lot to handle.
Oh, it definitely can. But I would say first and foremost, you're not alone. Gastroparesis is more common than many people realize, and there are so many resources out there to help you on this journey.
That's reassuring.
So don't hesitate to reach out to your healthcare team, your doctor, registered dietitian, maybe even a therapist. They can provide personalized guidance and support. It's like building a team of experts to help you navigate this.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of connecting with others who are also living with gastroparesis.
Yeah, we talked about support groups.
Play online communities
Yeah.
where you can share experiences, offer tips, encourage each other. Knowing that other people truly understand what you're going through, it can be so validating and empowering.
It's a reminder that you're not in this alone.
Yeah.
As we wrap up our deep dive into gastroparesis and its connection to diabetes, what are some key takeaways that you'd like our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the most important thing is that knowledge is power. Understanding how gastroparesis works, its connection to diabetes, the factors that can influence it. That's the first step towards managing it effectively.
Right. You have to understand it before you can manage it.
And secondly, while there might not be a cure just yet, there are so many things you can do to improve your quality of life.
There are.
Dietary modifications, exercise, stress management, seeking support. You have so many tools at your disposal. And finally, remember, this is a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate the small victories. And don't give up hope.
That's such a powerful message. It's a reminder that gastroparesis may present challenges,
Right.
but it doesn't have to define you. You have the strength and resilience to navigate this and to find ways to thrive. That's what Visions Beyond is all about. Empowering you with knowledge and giving you the tools to take control of your health. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Visions Beyond. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered.
It's been a pleasure being here and sharing this information. Thanks for having me.
And a huge thank you to our amazing listeners for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found this helpful and that you feel more equipped to navigate the complexities of gastroparesis, especially in the context of diabetes. We'll leave you with this. What small changes can you make today to support your digestive health and your overall well-being? Remember, even the smallest steps can lead to big changes over time. This is Visions Beyond signing off.